In the last lecture, we noted that utilitarianism displays impartiality. That is to say, achieving one person's good isn't to be preferred to achieving another person's good. And we said that this is an advantage of utilitarianism, since we believe morality should be impartial. But should morality always be impartial? Consider the case of drowning. John is walking alone by a lake and notices two children drowning, one of whom is his child. Unfortunately, the children are far apart from each other and equally distant and far from John. No one else is around to help. Consequently, or let's assume for the sake of argument, John can save one child but not both children. The utilitarian assessment is straightforward. Since saving a life is a good consequence, regardless of whose life it is, John has no ethical reason to save his child rather than the stranger. That is to say, it would not be unethical, according to the utilitarian, for John to save the young stranger rather than his own child. Nevertheless, I believe most of us would say that John has a distinct obligation or duty to save his child, but no such duty to save the young stranger. Indeed, if John didn't have a preference for saving his own child, we would likely say that John had acted wrongly. In other words, if John rescued his child, but consequently could not rescue the other child, the young stranger, we would likely say that it was a sad situation, but John did the best he could do. But if John rescued the other child first and consequently could not rescue his own child, then we would likely think that something worse has happened, that John had neglected his duty. This seems to be a problem for the utilitarianism. One tempting way would be to appeal to rule utilitarianism. The rule could be that parents should place extra weight on the good of their children, that they should prefer the good of their children over the good of other children. And the claim would be that this rule, in general, results in the best consequences. But as we noted earlier in this lecture, we may well wonder whether this rule adequately captures the idea of parental obligation. Nevertheless, there is a more important problem that now arises. This rule seems to go against the core idea of utilitarianism, which is that everyone's good is equal, that the only important aspect of good is the amount, not whose good it is. Indeed, the effort to accommodate justified partiality, the partiality that arises from family ties or friendships, seems to lead to the utilitarian calculation being relativized to a point of view. Is the good of John's child greater than the good of another child? If John is doing the calculation, the answer is yes. But if someone else is doing the calculation, the answer is no. Well, but if we incorporate this rule, we now have undermined the spirit of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism, recall, aims to promote the good. But if the good is being relativized to a point of view, then we no longer have something we can call the good. It seems that utilitarianism cannot justify partiality. Let me summarize the sorts of problems for utilitarianism that we have discussed. We have shown that, we've explored that it ignores the distribution of benefits. It seems to have, in many cases, unacceptable consequences, outrageous consequences. And, as we see, it seems to deny or not be able to accommodate the idea of partiality. Let me emphasize that these are problems, not refutations. Perhaps there is a clever way of modifying utilitarianism that adequately addresses these issues. And if this were a course in utilitarianism, that would be our next task. Instead, I would like to move on to the next ethical theory, one that takes much more seriously the idea of duty.